think we're missing one.
I'd like to welcome everyone to today's episode of Truth, the reality of the headline. Today we have a very special guest. We have, Captain Chad Mullenberg. We have Jason Harney, Christopher Hoyer, David Lee, and Ray BESHIRS with us. And so Ray was 23 years Texas Police Department. He has 17 plus years in police training. He's taught searching systems, throughout the United States for what are you going on now?
It was established. Our company was established in 2013, but I've been teaching for 17 plus years in various systems, and mainly defensive tactics and use of force and that kind of thing.
Perfect. And we got Sergeant David Lee. He's got 15 plus years in law enforcement, 12 plus years instructor experience, SWAT leader, SWAT commander. He teaches nationwide as well. He also provides instructor courses. We got Christopher Hoyer. He's got 20 plus years as a street cop, a public speaker. He actually does the Marine Corps Marine police officer training as well. He's got his book published, When That Day Comes, Training for the Fight. We have Jason Harney. He's retired LVM PD sergeant, 72nd Military Police Company. He does Desert Shield and Desert Storm. He's also a producer. He has The Wounded Blue and several other biographies he came out with. We got Captain Chad Mullenberg, 20 plus years U.S. Army. He's got the Minnesota Army National Guard, if I'm not mistaken. And then 8 plus years SWAT operator, defensive tactics trainer. And then Ray, tonight's episode, one of the things that you actually made a post to do a poll in regard to the importance of law enforcement, keeping their physical fitness. I know as officers go through the academy, we set a bar as far as minimal requirements. Okay. But once that requirement's met, they've done away with so many of the different ongoing evaluations throughout the years, yearly evaluations. And, I personally believe that it's important. I know many of you also do, that, it's important for that ongoing evaluation to ensure that, officers are at their very best, whether it be physically or mentally as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we set a standard in law enforcement, especially when you go into a police academy, and it's where you're doing push-ups and set-ups. And even before you get in the academy, most agencies out there will have some type of physical standard. Maybe it varies a little bit throughout the United States. And of course, some of them don't even have a standard at all. There are some small agencies where officers graduate at police academy. A lot of them put themselves through that academy, and then they get to the smaller agencies and they end up not having a physical fitness at that time. And some of them are unfit. And that's the reason why they go to those agencies to start with, because they attempted to work for a larger agency that may have had that physical fitness requirement, and they ended up failing.
Chad and I had the pleasure of speaking earlier, and we were talking about the requirements that they have, like being able to run a mile or 1.5 miles in 15 minutes, and it's like, then you can have somebody that's obese that goes out there and can run a 1.5 miles in 15 minutes, and a lot of individuals just do what it takes to get by, but then they don't maintain, and a lot of times we see that, self-motivation, a lot of times it's hard for a lot of individuals, but, in this business, it should be self-preservation that drives that self-motivation. For whether it be your personal safety or the safety of others as well, and especially riding around with partners. I know Officer Hoyer, had a pretty bad experience where, his partner wasn't physically able to hop a fence, which, ultimately could have put his life in jeopardy. So it's vital that, we have the ongoing trainings. That's why I love what you do. And I know Chad does as well, has a different organizations that go with it, trains in multiple disciplines.
Yeah, it's easy. It's easy for us to push that back on some of those officers, and I'm just as guilty of that as anyone. But the standard is set by the agencies, the administrators for those agencies, and it's easy to blame them as well in these circumstances and say, well, that they're the problem, the administrators. But I think we all have a role to play in this. And when I say that, it's because most of us as taxpayers don't want our taxes raised. But then again, we want every officer to have to be physically fit who's not getting the time to work out while they're on duty. And Jason and I have discussed that in numerous conversations that we've had. Jason, if you want to fill in on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a huge issue in law enforcement. I think all of our individual experiences will I think we'll all agree upon that. I mean, let's face it. In your neck of the woods, Ray, there's a place I'm sure you're familiar with called the Cooper Institute in Dallas, Texas.
Sure.
And a lot of the law enforcement physical fitness standards that a lot of agencies either use or had drawn from comes from a database that the Cooper Institute put together of over 250,000 law enforcement officers over a period of about 20 years. And with that, they came up with certain cut points to determine certain levels of fitness. Now, here's where things get kind of horrific in the physical fitness side. Most agencies choose the 99 percentile, which means that 99% of the law enforcement population, in theory, could complete these standards in a physical fitness test. And what are those? 18 push-ups in 1 minute, 15 sit-ups, no time limit, and a mile and a half in 17 minutes, 17 seconds, which we all know, of course, as Michael pointed out, you could walk that and probably pass. So we really haven't challenged ourselves, and this is decades in the making. So we are now where we're at today, where we have a very obese population, which shouldn't be a surprise. The United States has the same problem. We hire from the human race, and thus law enforcement has to deal with it as well.
And then and especially in your biographies, how much of the tragedies that, I mean, all of us here, how much of the tragedies has weighed in due to the physical fitness? And I mean, I'm not just going to say the physical fitness, but I mean, there's other like trainings that, go into that as well, being, ready for any kind of moment. But how much plays into because an individual just wasn't really physically capable, whether it be to defend themselves, act in behalf and, pursuit or whatever the case may be?
Well, I wish there was some type of statistic that we could point to on that, I don't know of any, but I know that those situations do exist and they have existed and they will continue to do so until we make those changes in law enforcement that need to be made. And that includes, stiffer penalties for the criminals out there that assault law enforcement officers, and going from there and trying to, build up the physical fitness as well. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of patience, from us, the citizens, and within the agencies themselves, because again, we didn't get in this situation overnight. We're not going to dig out of it in a year, unfortunately.
Yes, sir. And well, how much plays into, being physically fit is kind of, in this line of work, hesitation factor is always going to be key in every moment. Now, if an individual isn't fit or they're not properly trained to where, being out of shape does play a part in reaction time, mobility, coordination and everything else like that. So in like the defensive tactics training that almost everyone here, pursues in, is that something that you stress during those trainings that it's vital basically for an officer to be, physically fit to maintain, defensive tactics, regardless if it's ground control or anything else?
Do you want to comment on that one, Chad?
I don't think Chad has a mic.
Oh, okay. Yeah. See, yeah. Unfortunately, I couldn't put up what he read or what he put up against the screen while I couldn't read it. So, okay, I get it. Yeah, it does. And every once in a while, when they come to our class, especially if it's our week-long class, when they by probably day 3 of that class, you start to see the ones that are not physically fit, or they'll sit there and they'll say, "Oh, I need to get in shape." and those are some of the things that we'll hear during those training events. And most of those agencies and those officers, at least they're trying. They're there for a reason, and there's a lot of them that are trying to work on their physical fitness, and that's one of the reasons why they're getting into the defensive tactics realm as well. It's something that they enjoy. Plus, they're working on their physical fitness, or they're building confidence at the same time. But yeah, it plays a huge role not only in training, but on the street as well when an officer gets involved in that physical encounter, because it goes times 10 out on the street or times 100. Everything's happened so fast.
And then can the defensive tactics also be in an instance to where, an individual that otherwise wouldn't be that physically fit, but being able to, as long as we know our weaknesses and we recognize our weaknesses, and being able to employ different tactics that, still, even though ultimately we may be seen as at a disadvantage, to where knowing the tactics, being able to employ the tactics and engaging those tactics, when that time comes, is that something that the courses are able to kind of modify based on each officer, based on their physicality? Because I know you and I, in one of our first conversations, we were talking about, females.
Sure.
Everybody don't want to like to say they're not as physically dominant, but when reality sets in, but being able to employ defensive tactics in an essence of being able to disregard the disadvantage to make it like an upper advantage. You and I have spoken about the different disciplines of martial arts, of how that'll actually benefit as well too, because of size or lack of, or maybe just not physically fit like others are.
Well, I mean, the first thing that we obviously have is our tactics, and using the biggest muscle we have is our brain. And when we go into those situations, asking ourselves, do we have the resources to be able to solve this problem? And we have to ask ourselves as well beforehand. And that means, are we physically fit enough to be able to solve the problem? And we have to hold ourselves accountable to a certain degree, especially when you're out there wearing the badge and you're going out there not only representing every citizen that's in your community, but also representing your family, and they need you to come back home to them. So, being physically fit is a responsibility, obviously, that each officer takes upon themselves. But, we don't want to condemn those officers. We want to help those officers. And that's one of the things I think that we really need to push, because you always get more with honey than you do with vinegar. And I think that most of us know that. So if we approach it with wanting to help these officers to improve themselves through the physical fitness programs, or some of the health fairs that they have with the insurance programs as well, to start losing some weight, I think that would be very beneficial to them.
And, Chad and I, when we were speaking earlier today, we were talking about leaving military and going into civilian sector law enforcement, about how he was shocked about the lack of requirements that were there for like physicality or anything else. And so kind of go around. So Jason, I'll start with you, and we'll just kind of do a circle loop around here. How much from when you went in to what you experience, with fellow brothers and sisters that are, whether it be active or, that transition across that time, how much did the physicality importance and how it was stressed on, yearly evaluations and things like that change from the point of, when you were serving, when you were in, opposed to what you see now?
Well, it's kind of apples and oranges. And unfortunately, I think we look at the military, at least from the police point of view, as kind of the gold standard. It's what we all wish that we had, but I'm not aware of a single agency that does. You have to remember, as police trainers, we function in a world where we have to train people who are going to have a problem if you put on a training class that requires their heart to beat 10 beats faster than when the class started. That's a problem, obviously. And of course, you could take the simplistic approach and say, well, there's a wall between you and me, and I'm on the other side of it getting my ass kicked. Can you get over that wall to back me up? That's an easy way to, find out if somebody is actually going to be willing to participate in the class, and if they're going to get something out of it, and if they're going to understand why we're doing what we're doing. But even that argument sometimes fails. So the difference between the military and police is, you have a lot of other things. Uncle Sam tells you this is what you're going to do. You're going to do it. You're a lot less apt to make a stink about it, because that's part of the culture. You take an annual fitness test. You need it to promote. You need it to transfer. You need it to go to the good schools. Whereas in the police department, it's different. You have unions. You have the municipalities that oversee the policies and the procedures. And a lot of times, as we know, defensive tactics and physical fitness goes by the wayside.
100%. And Ray, you want to touch on it now?
Yeah, he's correct. Most of the agencies that don't have a physical fitness requirement also don't have defensive tactics either. And we'll see that when I've had officers that signed up for a course, their agency sent them, but while they were at our course, they said, when I go back, I won't be able to teach. He said, they just sent me to this. He says, but it's going to be for me, because they will not allow me to teach when I get back. And it's because we don't have a defensive tactics program. And they would say that every time that we try to implement something, that the city or the county will say, no, we can't do that. We don't have the funds for that, or we're afraid that we're going to have injuries. There's a lot of excuses that go on as well, unfortunately, and I wish that wasn't the case. I wish we could address the problem, come up with solutions instead of just making excuses why we can't do something.
And then now, how Jason and Ray, how you just said about, the lack of being right there. So does that affect the numbers as far as individuals when it's an option for officers to sign up to attend the defensive tactics training? If someone knows that they're not really as physical fit as the rest of the brothers and sisters that are attending the trainings, do you see the restrictions on individual officers actually coming in there and attending those trainings, even though it would be beneficial to them, but because they kind of like shy away because they know their own physical fitness or lack of, per se?
Well, they'll have ones where it's free. They're not getting paid, but they'll have it to where they can go and sign up, or they'll have a voluntary thing where the officers can come to it voluntarily that are in the agencies because Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is being taught, or some type of other martial art, or a combination of. And a lot of those officers that do that have that skill in those agencies, and there's a lot of them, especially larger agencies, that will have several people in the department that do martial arts, but they'll have that and they'll offer that training, and they'll get 2 people to show up, out of a department of sometimes 1,500, and I know that locally because there's some officers here that that I work with or I train with, and they'll say we invite people and they just don't show up.
And then now, Christopher, I know you know firsthand about the physical fitness and how you actually hold a passion about that necessity. If you want to touch on it real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. I think going back to the academies is just my opinion only, and I feel like kind of a jerk saying it this way, but I mean, most of the guys that I used to train with were guys that have been on the street in years and years and years, and they left the street early on in their career. They went down to be DT instructors or what have you, but they've got no skill sets, whatever. And a lot of the stuff that they learn is off of YouTube or what have you. And I mean, I hate saying it out loud, but I get down there on the mat with these guys and I say, look, this is great for what we're doing here at 30 to 50% in a controlled environment. But the second somebody starts to resist arrest, the stuff you guys are teaching isn't going to work. It's flat out, it's just not going to work. And they argue with me about it, and I just prove it to them every single time. And I said, look, man, I respect what you guys are doing, but you got to think of something better, because the stuff you're doing, this isn't working. We're talking about, some knockdown drag-outs where you can get your life taken away from you if you're not spot on with these kinds of things. And if you hesitate out there, I mean, I hate to say it, and you guys probably all been there too. It's one of those things where you let your guard down for a second and somebody come up and just kill you. So for me there's absolutely no excuse whatsoever why you should not stay physically fit. I know you guys already touched on this a little bit too. It's it's highly important for me to stay as physically fit as I can, but if I'm not and my partner gets hurt, that's just something I can't deal with. I can't. I'm turning my badge because that's just unacceptable to me. So,
and I know Ray made a joke during our first broadcast about the people that get their brown belt online.
Well, yeah, actually, they do exist. We've had people to contact us and ask us if we have a defensive tactics instructor course that they can take online and be defensive tactics instructors. And I said no, and I said that will never happen with Blue Shield.
Yes, sir. And then now, David, finally to you, sir.
Yeah, a couple of things I just wanted to add. Ray hit the nail on the head. Is that I work for a department, and that department even offered incentives for working out, for staying in shape. And we were offered an hour workout a day. And if you tacked on your lunch, you got an hour and 20 minutes to work out. But I can tell you right now, the amount of people that actually took advantage of that on a daily basis. And as a patrol sergeant, I would encourage it. And I would say, hey, even if you took a little bit longer and you took the whole hour and 20 minutes, which is supposed to include the shower and getting back in your patrol uniform, they still wouldn't take advantage of it if I gave them an hour and a half. It just was, it was kind of a sad thing to see, is that it was a cultural thing. And if it's not pushed from the top down, or it's not pushed universally across the board, you're not going to get that, that buy-in, you know what I mean? So for those who took it upon themselves to stay physically fit, they were in the gym every day. And there were guys before we had this on-duty workout program, guys and gals that would work out before they started their shift or after their shift. So when they got the on-duty workout program, it just became an incentive that they just kind of adopted into their normal shift routine. But for those who don't want to do it at all, and if it's not encouraged by the whole entire chain of command or the whole entire police department, it's not going to work. And we all know, I mean, the people in this group, I assume everybody trains outside of police work as well, especially, you know, for example, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, you go into, you know, you take a couple classes a week, you feel inept, you know, if you don't get more than one class a week, right? And I know in California, you know, defensive tactics was only 4 hours in every 2 years. So you can imagine how unproficient you would be at ground fighting, you know, or controlling somebody when, you know, it takes 2 years of 2 to 3 classes a week just to get a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. So you look at the disparity there. It's completely, you know, ridiculous that we don't encourage a little more physical fitness, a little more hands-on training. And like Ray said earlier, a lot of it is, oh, well, we don't want our people to get hurt. And that's true, because you get people that are so grossly out of shape, they do get hurt, or they make excuses and say they got hurt so they can avoid training, or they're embarrassed of their physical condition, so they don't want to get involved. So it's a compounding issue. And then you have this group of people that are now promoting into, you know, leadership positions that are used to this type of environment, this type of culture. And this is going to continue unless we find some way to reshape that culture.
I'm glad you said it like that as well, too, because it's one of the things that's overlooked the most, and that's in regards to the culture. Because, you know, agencies, you know, as they develop and as they set the bar, that becomes the culture of that agency, regardless of how anybody wants to look at it. And when individuals have minimal requirements, or they just do what they do just to get by, or have the bare minimum all the way across the board, that's going to be the culture of that agency. And it's going to infect every officer that, you know, is in that agency. Even some of the veterans may get affected by that, just lackadaisical, just minimal requirements, just doing what it is just to get by, and things like that. And, you know, a lot of complacency, I believe, you know, falls into that lack of physical fitness, because the complacency every day that, oh, I've never seen no action. It's just been, you know, on and on and on. And then that one day comes to where you're going to wish that you were physically fit, and it's, you know, too late too soon, you know?
Absolutely.
And then, Chad, do we have sound now?
I hope so.
There we go.
Can you hear me?
He's with us.
Hey. All right. You know, I think, unfortunately, I missed a lot of the period leading up to this. I apologize for that, gentlemen. But the part that I did hear, I agree with every bit of it. I think on a side note, as a subtopic, we should probably talk about comprehension of technology. You know, there being some kind of a requirement for that, as demonstrated by me here earlier in this podcast. This is a tough crowd. Ray's given me the courtesy laugh there, at least. I appreciate that. But especially what David was just talking about, it's easy to sit back and criticize leadership, but it's also 100% true that it comes down to a leadership failure. You know, if this stuff isn't being emphasized, and not only emphasized, but also demonstrated at that upper level, you know, all the way from the chief on down, and especially with those trainers and those first line supervisors that have access to new recruits and officers, then you're not going to get the end product that you want. We just had a class graduate actually today from my former agency. I took part in training them on the first half of their academy experience. And, you know, we started out with high 60s, and I think 55 recruits graduated today. And a lot of that attrition can be attributed to PT, because what happens is they come in, and this is just speaking generally, this is what I've heard from across the country, is that whether you have a standard or not, but especially those agencies that have a low standard or no standard, what happens is recruits come in and they either don't have the heart to keep up and they quit, which, okay, you know, we wasted some time there for everybody. Or almost, I think more tragically, they do have heart. They prove that they can do what it takes. They lose a whole bunch of weight. You know, they'll get in shape. But the problem is eventually, if their conditioning was poor enough to start with, they're probably going to break. they're going to physically break, they're going to get hurt. And that's a tough one, because you see somebody who puts in all that effort, but we set them up for failure right at the start by not having some kind of entry level minimum requirements.
And I would like to touch on that as well. You spoke about from the top down, and I agree with that. And unfortunately, some of them, the leadership, some of them they're not physically fit as well. And so that's the reason why they don't want a physical fitness standard across the board, because it would affect them and possibly their jobs. But we're talking about people's lives. And again, even it's like I tell officers, I said, even as a 40-year-old officer on patrol, and I was a supervisor on patrol when I finally retired, even in my 40s, I was at a disadvantage to a certain degree. And the reason I say that is because most of the criminals that I was dealing with were early 20s, 18, 19. So now if you combine that maybe with being obese, and then now you're in that situation, and now you're on the ground fighting for your life. You're desperately trying to get your gun out of the holster, to defend your life, and they end up stripping it out of your hand, and killing you with your own gun. And those things have happened in law enforcement, unfortunately. But again, we can point fingers at everyone and say, hey, everyone's got a role in this, or we can come up with solutions on, maybe even this evening on, what can we contribute to this to solve the problems. And it's easy to sit back and throw our hands up and say, there's not enough money, or we're afraid that people are going to get hurt. And I've heard that as well. Or we can say, hey, how can we start off with a foundation and build from there, and let's improve law enforcement as a whole. And that's what we're trying to do with training. And so I think we all can add to that, not only with the physical aspect of it, but the training aspect, and make law enforcement better.
100%. And going into cost of, you and I touched on this, and I'm not going to say it's comical, but when you hear that I don't have the funds for that, to me, it's comical. I mean, that's where it goes into what I was saying earlier in regard to someone having, not just self-motivation, but that self-preservation. That every day you walk out that door, you're putting yourself in harm's way, period. I mean, you sign that dotted line saying that your life's going to come before anybody, respect your jurisdiction, wherever you serve. But, to not want to do that. But again, going back to, as David pointed out, and we all touched on in regard to culture, to where it starts from that top down, how many times in roll call does anybody even bring things like this up, or offer, or see if anybody else just wants to train in their spare time? You just don't see that, to where it has to be encouraged and it has to be enlightened. Partners, how many partners do you get that come through and actually want to, take your different courses, regardless of what they are, that they actually, come in together, that one can benefit the other?
Yeah, we see that definitely, where 2 or 3 officers from one agency will come, and because they're generally part of their training cadre, and they'll want to come and participate. I have it easy, guys, and as a trainer, I really do. And Chad's the same way. We have it easy, and the reason I say that is because the people that come to our classes want to be there. It's the in-service training where they don't want to be there. It's everyone that comes to ours, there's no problem. But when I have the in-service training, I'll have officers they're trainers for their agency, and they say, well, what do I do when I have an officer that comes in and sits on the wall and says, hey, I can't do this. I just want to sit and watch, and you sign off on me participating in defensive tactics. And I strictly tell them, I said, I wouldn't do that. And I said, not only that, can you imagine being on the stand now, and this person was involved in a deadly force situation, and maybe the physical aspect of what they're able to accomplish physically played a role in that. And now you're on the stand saying that, no, they actually sat on the sideline on the wall and wasn't able to participate. And what I always tell them at that point is, you need to send an email to your administration and inform them that this individual is sitting on the wall and not wanting to participate, or inform the supervisor immediately. And I said, that way, maybe they can address it. Maybe there's a medical issue they're not aware of, but at least you're documenting that problem. That way, they can't say later on, hey, did they participate? You signed off on it as a defensive tactics instructor. You said that they participated. They were able to perform. And now they said that they sat on the wall and they weren't able to. I said, it can end up costing you your job.
And
Hey,
then
mind if I jump in on that one really quick?
of course.
Well, I mean, I 100% agree with what you're saying there, Ray. And unfortunately, we all know those same guys that are sitting on the wall in DT are going to be the same guys sitting on the wall in a real fight. You know, I've had it happen before. I've had our internal affairs guys drive past me, and I'm in a fight with two guys in the middle of an alleyway, and they come up there just to check, you know, whatever it is we're doing. They make your documentation, and they drive off. It's like, dude. So it's really sad. I mean, it does happen, but I mean, that's kind of what we're facing with some of these guys out there. But going backpedaling just a little bit on the one thing you're talking about with having a baseline or a starting point, I don't want to try to guilt people into why they should or shouldn't train or what have you, or, you know, get on the range more or whatever else it is. But the thing I came up with, I think Michael and I talked about this 3 or 4 shows ago, maybe, I'm not sure, but trying to motivate people to not only want to just stay in shape, but just stay in the community in general. That I figured out for myself was I was digging through all my my plaques one day. I was trying to decide if I should decorate my office, and I came across my oath of office, and I'm like, man, I actually read it, and I got like totally motivated. I was like, wow, this was why I got into this, and for me, it really, really worked. I thought, man, I read it a couple of times and I mean, I've been retired coming up on 4 years now, and I kind of just felt like I was brand new again, wanted to get back into it, and that may or may not work for some folks. It worked for me. Just to remind them, hey, man, don't forget why you signed up. You know, why you signed on a dotted line to do this kind of stuff, and how many people can do what we do. You know, it's pretty special that you're here. So.
And again, going back to the requirements, you know, because it should be, as you just said, not many people can do what you do. But when you set up the requirements at bare minimal to where anybody can come in, and again, it goes back to that truth aspect of it, to where, you know, why are you really, you know, taking this oath of office? You know, are you really doing it for the greater good? Or are you doing it because it was just there? You just want to try it out? Or are you going to pull your firearm if need be? Or are you going to defend, you know, fellow brothers and sisters if need be? There's so many different factors that go into that. And again, going back to the physical fitness aspect of it, I don't know why somebody wouldn't want to have that self-preservation. And then what I was going to ask is, if an agency as a whole, if administration as a whole has done away with the yearly evaluations and kind of minimized requirements, is it possible for brass to implore or impose specific requirements regardless of what, I mean, how much of, because I know with my union, with the union reps, to where, you know, officers could say, well, I'm going to go to my union rep because administration as a whole doesn't require this. You know, it isn't fair for, you know, my brass to be forcing me to maintain physicality. So, and that's what I kind of wanted to do with this broadcast tonight, is to kind of, you know, find what kind of ways we can, whether, you know, we submit it with each state or just based on encouragement at first, on how we can actually push this, because of it's vital that, you know, officers should care about, you know, the physical fitness aspect of everything. So is it possible for Bryce to do that regardless of administration blocking it?
I think it is, but it's going to have to come through our politicians. It's going to have to come through our state and federal and even maybe local politicians as well, where the city councils start realizing, hey, we need more money for this. So we need to allow officers to work out while they're on duty. And then we need to have a physical fitness standard that is followed. And it's going to take 3 to 5 years to implement for each agency. And I think that's plenty of time. If you knew you had 3 years to be able to get in physical shape, I would hope that you could by then. Texas DPS did that, matter of fact, and they got sued. And I think that's what most of the agencies worry about when they have that situation. They worry about the the financial aspect of fighting court cases with their own officers over having a physical requirement. Now, the thing about it is when they get hired on, there is a physical requirement. So even if you had an officer that was not able to, let's say, get up off the ground at the range or whatever it may be, or had problems getting up off the ground, I think you could at that point send them back for that initial physical requirement that you gave them when they got hired on, if nothing else, because that was the standard that they had to meet when they got hired on. So why would that not continue to be the standard that they have to meet to stay employed?
Perfect. And then Jason, you want to jump in on this?
Well, I think that's kind of the big question we should answer here. And I know we'll probably all agree on this, but why is it that you have to jump through that hoop to hire on and graduate a police academy, and probably most agencies in this country, but then once you have graduated the academy, you never have to jump through that hoop again? It makes no sense. I mean, why are we even having, recruits run and do push-ups and sit-ups and physical things in the academy if we're basically telling them that when they actually start doing the job for real, it doesn't matter anymore? Or at least as far as David was talking about, the culture would tell us. It tells me we have to reimagine the culture, because until we do that, every department is going to be individualistic, which doesn't really do the profession any good. We know it for every time there's a Derek Chauvin case with George Floyd, that tarnishes the badge for every police department. So if you tell me that Jacksonville Sheriff's Office is giving blue belts to their graduating academy recruits in jiu-jitsu, hey, hands to them. I think that's great. But what about the other 18,000 police departments in this country? Why aren't they being trained exactly the same way? And it goes the same thing for physical fitness. Until we stop being so individualistic and look at this more in the bigger picture as a law enforcement profession and take steps that encourage agencies to ensure that their cops are fit, I don't think we're going to really change anything. And if we're not testing them on an annual basis, I mean, we all been through this, right? 5 years down the road, and you see some of the people you went through the academy with, you don't even recognize them anymore. That is a problem. Okay. So I don't know what the answers are. It's a very complex situation, but those are the questions that have to be asked to our leaders, to the public, and to our profession.
That's your next biography.
As you actually, that's true, as Ray knows.
Well, it takes, what you do. I mean, and that's why I commend you for what you do. I thank you so much for what you do, with the movies and the biographies and everything else too, because, that's why I love doing these streams. That's why I do anything that I can to push other individuals forward in what they're doing, because it takes individuals to put it in the face of the public, because, all of us on here right now know how the media is, against us, and how it is really. And that's why the physical fitness aspect, that's why this is such an important topic to indulge on, because, as the media portrays law enforcement and how the civilian sector views law enforcement now, many officers are already walking on their tiptoes, wondering and being hesitant. There's so many different factors that play into what the media is pushing in there, to where we need to have another media outlet that's out there promoting the different things that encourage officers to be aware to actually, do these things that need to be done and maintain themselves for, self-preservation, self-motivation. Hey, Chad, you want to touch base on this as well too? Like kind of what you and I were speaking about earlier about the self-motivation, what kind of drives that, and how we can actually encourage the leaders to, actually step up and make this a requirement.
Yeah, I just had a thought as far as implementing some kind of standards across the board. And I don't know, I mean, this might not be a popular opinion, but, given the conditions with how challenging it is with recruitment and retention right now, an option might be if there was to be some kind of a nationwide or some type of widespread mandate, one option would be to establish that as individuals are coming into the profession. That's one way to, I guess, to create that cultural change that we know needs to happen. That's something that, I played a role in as far as with the agency that I worked for, specifically creating a cultural change, not so much specific to PT, more to do with response to resistance and aggression, bringing martial arts training into the job. But it's definitely, that's a path of lesser resistance than trying to go after officers who are at varying levels in their career, and who many of them have got one foot out the door as we speak.
Well, here's a thought, and this is something that we've always tried to push, and it makes a lot of sense, and it goes along with what you're saying, Chad. What if you just grandfathered every single incumbent cop in this country, let them, continue to eat their fast food and be obese and unhealthy, and whatever happens, happens. But you say every person we hire from July 1st of 2022 on will take a physical fitness test every year during their career. Then 20 years from now, when all those other guys have retired, what do you have? You have probably about an 80% fit force in this country. Now, will we take such a step? We look at that as drastic, right? But is it really?
No, I think it's very doable, actually. If you take that stance, there's no threat at all to any of the officers that are currently working in the profession, and like Chad said, that are on their way out the door. And I think that's very doable, and I think that not only that, politicians would be on board with making those state mandates for that, and I think most departments as well would say, we're for that. We would like to see that, and then have a standard across the nation, no matter what it may be, not just with each individual state, but potentially overall across the United States, where that standard is the same for the physical fitness requirement, whatever it may be. It may be a rower, or maybe push-ups. That's the problem, is every department out there has had different standards that they go by, and they end up in civil court because there was nothing backing that standard that they came up with. And they thought, well, it was just a good idea to, haul a 50-pound ball across a field. And if you can, then you're hired.
Well, you're right. Every standard has to be legally defensible. It has to be based on a job task analysis. So you can't just say that I'm going to drag a dummy 50 feet that weighs 200 pounds. That has to equate to some task that, a police officer would actually do. And that's what the Cooper Institute did. I mean, they don't have you do a vertical jump and run 1.5 miles and a 300-meter sprint and doing push-ups and sit-ups. They don't have you do that just because it's cool. They do it because it is equated to a specific task in reference to core strength, upper body strength, and cardiovascular fitness. Now, what standard a department chooses is typically up to them. And as we talked about earlier in this show, my department chose the 99th percentile, as most departments do, which of course, again, means 99% of the law enforcement community can pass that test, which, is pretty sad.
What if we push it on the equality side? So, and I know a lot of people are going to hate me for this conversation right here, but I speak truth and say the things that a lot of people don't want to hear, but need to hear. So like, let's think about the equality side of it. Okay. So females joining the academy, okay, their requirements to graduate aren't what men are. So the requirements for being able to do the 25 push-ups for men may be 17 for women. But you're still going to be facing the equality of the criminal when you hit the streets or when you graduate or you are an officer. Okay. So if that requirement, and you want to talk about equality, there should be an equality from every agency or every officer within an agency. So pushing it in that aspect, because something, as critical as law enforcement, pushing the equality role, we should be able to get those mandates put into place in agencies nationwide. Because, hey, if I expect the equality, I want each one of my officers to be able to have, because what are requirements? I want you equal to this. This is the bare minimum right here. So if we say it like that, so, kind of going, Jason, what you're saying about the 99th percentile. Okay, so if we're having to incorporate those that aren't physically fit, have to incorporate women who may be, less physically dominant. I'm not going to say that it's all, but, we all know the reality of everything. So if we're going to be placing these standards and these minimum requirements, but yet we need to have the equality within our agencies so that everybody's equal in what they're able to perform, but they also have to be equal to perform to the suspects, the offenders that are out there that they're going to come in confrontation with. A female, if she's, taking one or a male that's, less physically dominant or just out of shape, and they come across an offender that they need to take immediate action on. We have we can deploy the taser, the baton, anything else like that to kind of make up for that. But pushing that equality standard, it has to be possible to where we say, hey, if you can't do this, it's gone. But if you just put the bare minimum on there, all of us have seen prison yards. Criminals strengthen themselves. And Ray was touching on it earlier when he was, in his 40s and, facing individuals in their 20s. If somebody's the top brass is not going to make it mandatory or make it available for the brothers and sisters, the officers within that agency to maintain that physicality, I mean, something has to be pushed in there. I mean, they want to push the equality. Well, I want equality of all my officers to be able to maintain a certain physicality, a certain mental structure, and things like that as well. And then I think we're on Christopher. You want to touch on it?
I was gonna say I don't hate you, man. Don't worry about it. You're good. So,
appreciate that.
We're you guys are talking about the academy standards and stuff like that, and I know with my old agency with Phoenix, they were real big on liability and these kinds of things, and everything boiled down to money, of course, which makes sense. I get it. I mean, they're but they very quickly realize that when they have something happens that they end up getting sued for, they're going to pay a whole lot more out of pocket than they would just keeping that internal. So for me, I mean, I was thinking about this when you guys were chatting. Very simple solution. If you have some kind of incentive, whatever it is, it can be you get 10 hours PA or whatever. It wouldn't be that hard because I know the first question they're always going to ask is, well, we got to bring all these people down to the academy or down to wherever we're going to have all this training kind of going on, which I think is just bullshit because you really don't. Because all you got to do really is just say, what, everybody in the world's got a freaking smartphone. Get yourself with your timestamp recording what you're doing out there. Load that up to whoever your instructor is, and then you can say, look, here it is right here. I did it. I did my 2 hours of PT for this quarter or whatever it was, and that's completely simple. You could do that all day long and it wouldn't be a problem, and let's face it. I know Ray touched on this earlier too about holding the instructors accountable as well. Cause you got a lot of these guys that are like, yeah, you're good. I'll just, you're my buddy. We graduated together. I'll just check you off. And then what is that doing for those guys? It's not doing a damn thing for them, so I think there's certainly liability back on us if we do that as instructors. Cause that's what I do too. As an instructor, I try to hold these guys accountable as much as possible. It's like, if you're not meeting the standards, you're not meeting the standards. I can't check you off on that, and I won't, and nor should I, or I'm just compromising my own integrity there. So, but that's just my opinion. But you guys can hate me now if you want.
And I'll let someone else touch on this, but the standards are not going to get better under our current conditions. Unfortunately, they're not. There's just not. It's hard enough, like Chad said, just to get people hired. These days, much less now try to implement a physical standard. And if we're being honest, most departments this is what we're talking about tonight. It's not on their top priority list. Getting people in uniform is their priority right now, and trying to reduce crime across the board. That way, when they go into the election cycle or they go into the city council meetings wanting more money or wanting a raise, then they are able to show, hey, I'm able to do something here. So those are the ones that are probably at the top of their board right now, and the physical fitness requirements probably pretty low. But we're going to have a higher insurance cost. We're going to have earlier death for these officers. I know Jason touched on that with a cardiologist in this film that he did. And if you want to lower those costs as well for the public, if you have officers that are physically fit, they're also going to use less insurance as well. So I think that's very beneficial too. Chad, you got something?
Well, another thing that comes to mind is the link between mental health and physical health. A lot of departments now, they're starting to do annual check-ins, kind of along the same thought process, I guess, in a way, as doing an annual PT test. But specifically with on the mental health topic, if you're in good physical shape, a lot of times that's going to contribute to your emotional well-being. It's going to contribute to your mental health, and you're going to make better decisions, whether it's in your personal life or whether it's on the job. There's just so many important benefits there. And to Chris's point, it's challenging on a number of different fronts, because talking about to use the mental health check-ins as an example, cops are going to be skeptical of that. Or going back to the physical fitness incentives, cops are going to find a way around it. It's like kindergarten class. When you get too many of us together, we figure out ways to game the system.
That's unfortunately all too true, man. I hate to admit it, but it's just true. So,
That's human nature. Yeah.
Yeah.
well, yeah.
And now, how much of the instructor courses, and David, you can touch on this too and kind of touch base on what they were talking about, but in your instructor courses, how much of what is given to the instructors are they actually using to instruct the other officers? I mean, do you guys oversee that, once somebody, receives their instructor certification, instructor license, by going through your courses, how many of them actually kind of follow up with instructing, or are they just doing it for their certification or doing it for, their training?
Well, most of them, hopefully, they're going back to their agencies. And I do see recertifications come through our program. I know Chad does as well through his that come back through. And so the ones that do come back through are generally teaching at their agency. So there's a lot of agencies out there that do have a defensive tactics program. And most of the ones that do have a defensive tactics program also have, or at least probably half, let's say, have some type of physical requirement as well. I know my agency you had to row twice a year on a concept row machine, and you had to do 2,000 meters. And I don't know if anyone's ever done that, but I tell you, it'll whoop your butt. Those 2,000 meters, the best I could do they implemented it when I was in my 40s, but the best I think I did was 742 or 744 or something like that in my 40s. So it put me in the 90 something percentile.
That's really good, Ray.
Well, I don't know if it's good or not. I don't think I can
tell you that's a good time.
I don't think I can do it now, but what my point is that there's easy standards like that you can put into place, and like I said, Texas DPS has been sued, matter of fact, in reference to the concept rower, and they had even the waist measurement that they did as well. And so they got involved in a lawsuit over that. But the concept rower is a good program, and I definitely recommend for anyone listening to this broadcast, contacts Texas DPS. No, probably not like me for saying that, but contact them and ask them about their program. And I know agencies in Texas, they actually came out to our agency and helped us implement the row test, and I think it's a good test to have, and I know that officers really benefited from it because I saw them in there. They had an hour to work out every day, and I saw them in there on the row machining. I personally did other things, but I did okay on the row whenever I had to do the thing. But I didn't like the row machine, but I was able to exceed the standard, should I say?
And then now, hey, David, real quick, with you being, SWAT leader, SWAT commander, and Chad, I know you were SWAT as well for 8+ years, but David, with, you having that experience as, SWAT leader, SWAT commander, how much in the defensive tactics do you think is, kind of vital for them as well in what you do? I mean, that's one of the.
So it is extremely vital, right? I mean, obviously you're going to encounter more scenarios where you're going to go hands-on than you're actually going to have to use your firearm. So defensive tactics for me was extremely important, just because, you're going to be dealing with handcuffing people, you're dealing with, people resisting arrest, but you're not going to be using lethal force in most of these scenarios, right? It's a very far and few case where you're actually using lethal force. So for me, it was extremely important, especially on the SWAT team environment, right? Because you're going to come across, you do your high-risk warrant services, you're going to come across a lot more people that are actually not the suspect than you are going to come across a suspect. You hit a drug house, you're going to hit, 12 people inside that house, all their friends sleep on their couch. You know what I mean? You get all those people in custody before you even get to your bad guy who's in the back room where he's already beat feet outside the back door. So those are the things that are really important to us, is how to control people. And it's extremely vital. And again, Ray does a fantastic job with this class. And I can say, that it is a perishable skill, and it takes a lot of training to be proficient at it. So for me, I always made it a part of my training to do some type of defensive tactics, weapon retention, or some type of hands-on, touching people and having role players involved. Not to the extent that we were doing anything live where we were grappling, but at least overcoming some resistance. So defensive tactics, I think, ties in. And it's extremely important. And if there's teams out there that aren't training. And I think it's going to be a fault to you later on, because you cannot use, obviously lethal force. And I say this respectfully, but I think that we've always heard the term, hey, you have your bag of tools, or you have your bag of tools around your waist, right? But I think as society's expectations change of what we do as cops, supposed to be superheroes and know everything and understand every single situation, I think that begins to hinder people as well, because now you're carrying, especially on patrol, you're already carrying 16 pounds worth of gear. On a SWAT team, you're carrying somewhere around 30 to 40 pounds worth of gear on you. And now, imagine going and doing a workout with 30, 40 pounds worth of gear on you, and now you have to grapple somebody with that on. It becomes a disadvantage because you can't use all these tools, because society doesn't want you to use all these tools, because sometimes these tools don't look great on YouTube, right?
Right.
So things have changed a lot. It's progressed a lot. I don't know if it's regressed or progressed. That's an argument for another day, but adapting to that change in the view of society is going to be another obstacle as well.
And that's another thing too that's kind of, I believe, has kind of changed with defensive tactics, and especially in I'll go ahead and say the past decade. I know Chad, coming back on this second time right here, made the joke about the technology, but technology today, how much more has that changed and kind of influenced the defensive tactics aspect of everything, because of individuals being able to communicate more with the cell phones, smartphones, the cameras, and everything else. How much does that influence, the increase in, defensive tactics and, the alertness, the awareness of the officers involved?
Go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, that's 100% right, Mike. That's something, as David was talking about the SWAT specific stuff, that I was thinking along those same lines with, whether you're talking about SWAT guys or you're talking about an officer on patrol, a lot of times currently we're not 100% focused on teaching cops how to kick butt. Instead, we're trying to teach officers how to intelligently control and defend themselves, because increasingly this stuff is getting, it's getting pulled through court. We've got body camera footage, we got cell phone footage that's widely available, and the community's demanding more. They're I forget who said it, but they expect us to be superheroes. We're experts at everything. I say we, I'm not a cop anymore, but they expect officers to be absolutely everything at every moment and never have a bad day. So for us to think that we can send officers out there and not have at least some kind of a basic working knowledge of how to control the human body and how to defend against a realistic attack, we're just setting them up for failure.
Especially when you have somebody sipping coffee with nothing better to do, so they pull their camera out and they got something stupid to say because they started videotaping halfway through the confrontation, and it's like, well, what you should have done was this, rather than the officer that's having to make that split-second decision, sitting there sipping their tea, just recording, like, look at this guy. It's like, his perspective's everything. And that's again going back to how the media plays against us, opposed to actually trying to encourage the fact that, so you have every officer tiptoeing around because they see the cameras pointing at them and things like that. It's like, hey, I just have to make sure that I'm doing this right, rather than just doing what you were trained to do, instinct, and de-escalating the situation as you were trained.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the word de-escalation. Go ahead.
No, that's what I was just about to tag onto you.
That word de-escalation gets thrown around a lot, and it's usually, the meaning of it has to do with verbal communication, very important. But I think an area that gets overlooked is having those kind of intermediate physical skills. A lot of the control stuff that we're doing, a lot of the stuff that Ray is doing, it's not injury producing necessarily. It's a way to slow things down a little bit so we can process and we can work through it without causing undue injury. And, the benefit on top of that is it doesn't look terrible on video when it's taken out of context, for example.
Yeah, the key is to get those officers also working as a team as well. And even if an officer is not as physically fit or appears to not be, and we got to be careful with that. It's just like I disagreed necessarily when Texas DPS did the waist line measurement. And the reason I say that, just because someone has a waistline, now, does it increase the potential of them having medical problems? Of course, yes, we do know that. But what I'm saying is, just because someone has a belly doesn't mean that they're not physically fit. And the reason I say that is, you look at, and hopefully he doesn't attack me for this if he ever sees me, but you look at Big Country in the UFC. Huge fat belly on the guy, but I tell you this, I wouldn't want to step in a ring with him. And I'm telling you, because he hits like a freight train, and he moves around like he's 160 pounds. So hopefully he'll take that as a compliment if he hears me saying that. But what my point is just because we see someone who may be a little overweight. I've known officers that are overweight. I've been overweight myself in my career. And luckily, when I decided I just wanted to not be overweight, then I started really working hard towards it. But everyone, I hate to discourage. What I'm saying is, if there's officers out there that are watching this now, I don't want them to be angry at us and say, well, they don't care about me because I'm overweight. I do care about them, and I know we all do, because there are our brothers and our sisters that wear the uniform. And that's why I agree with I think what Jason said is just across the board, saying, okay, let's grandfather everyone in, and let's start from scratch right here and build upon what we have, and better law enforcement, like I said, as a whole. But there's we get, again, more with encouragement, and I think if we start in with that and tell officers, listen, here, we're here to help you. We're not here to belittle you. We're not here to make you feel bad because you're not in shape. Our goal is to help them to live longer and to be able to retire with dignity and go home to their family every night. So if we can do that as a whole in law enforcement, I think we'll be all better for it. So will society.
100%. And John Hall just asked a question about the officers that become up in age. Should a 60-year-old be expected to meet the same requirement as a 30-year-old officer? Should the requirements be based on a certain age group? Kind of going back to what I was saying earlier about the equality aspect of everything. Because again, like, especially with brass, should brass, still maintain that physical fitness requirement as the officers that they're commanding? I believe so. I really do. I mean, it's any leader shouldn't expect, their subordinates to do anything that they themselves could not do. Again, with leadership, you got to lead by example. And I truly believe that if, somebody, and I don't want people to take this the wrong way, but if somebody becomes incapacitated or, to where they can't uphold their duties to the fullest, yet still demand that, their subordinates or anyone with them uphold, certain requirements that they themselves are not, I really believe that, that should be that line. And, it's the, how are we going to tell someone that's, been in the force for 20 years that, now that you're up in age and, you're starting to slow down, you're not meeting the physical requirement, it's either time for desk duty or time to start thinking about retirement. Is that fair? So many people, union reps, and everything else are going to say no, but, in my eyes, and I'm sure that most of society's eyes, that requirement should be all the way across the board, that equality aspect of everything.
Well, I think that's where you have to kind of determine which side of it you want. Are we testing people in physical fitness for reasons of health, to make them a healthier officer throughout their career? Like Chad was talking about, people who are healthier and more physically fit are going to be prone to be more emotionally well? Or are we testing them on a job task level and saying that you are passing this test on an annual basis in order to be able to perform the job of police officer, be it where you happen to be, whether you're a rural officer, a SWAT officer, a street officer, and everything in between? There's going to be certain standards. What I would say is, when we talk about reimagining culture, think about this. What if you had a police officer who started in the police academy, graduated the academy, and then was taking a physical fitness test each year? It would be very similar to the military, where you have a whole lot of data there of both male and female in all age groups, from 20 to 29, 30 to 39, and so on. Do the standards start to go lower based on age, based on gender? Yes, they do. But that's where you have to decide, because I know the point you were kind of making, Mike, was the idea that, a female's doing the same job as the male officer. Shouldn't they be tested under the same standard? But we do know that males and females perform differently physically. You cannot match things like upper body strength, as an example. So I don't think that's realistic. My idea is I believe we should be focusing more on health, because we're a very unhealthy profession that happens to mirror the population that we're hired from. But we need to focus more on physical fitness, nutrition, and emotional wellness, all three. Because guess what? All three of those factor into use of force decision-making in every single encounter.
100%. On top of that as well, too, those that become obese or not eating right, and especially in this profession, lack of sleep plays a large role in the physical fitness as well, too. And it's something that's kind of overlooked. You take a lot of the officers that and demographics play into that culture that, David was speaking about earlier. You take the officers up in Northwest. A lot of people think that the riots and everything else were done away with because the media stopped talking about them. But there's so much hatred towards law enforcement. They still have riots going on and so many different things going on. And they're so understaffed. So you have these officers working 15 hours, sometimes doubles. How's that physical fitness going to play into that? Or are you going to be able to maintain? Or are you going to start feeling lethargic to where that, nutrition and everything else starts playing into that role? Because a physical fit individual, 9 times out of 10 is, going to have a healthier mind and everything else as well, too. I'm not going to say that physicality, cures any kind of, mental strains and things like that, but it does play a large role in overcoming certain things or, mental fatigue that many of us may face in the day-to-days.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure we answered John's question as well. Do we think that a 60-year-old should have the same physical requirement as a 30-year-old? And I say no. The row standard also that I was talking about was implemented for our agency. They didn't require a 60-year-old to row the same time as a 30-year-old. It was based on your age and your weight, and you had to hit the 50 percentile for your age group and your weight. So you weren't going up against the same time as an officer that was younger than you or even thinner than you. So I wanted to make sure that we answered that question for him.
You were just saying that because you can't hit 5 push-ups.
Oh, I can hit 5 push-ups. I might hurt the next day because my back hurts all the time.
Well, from his knees.
Yeah, well, it's. I think it's part of it's wearing that the gun belt for so long, and then also doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. My lower back kills me. So, yeah.
And then,
you guys.
I know Chad touched on it as well too in regard to like the mental health. Okay, so in other conversations talking about us trying to smash the stigma to say that it's okay to say we're not okay. How much do you think on someone knowing, like I guess the self-esteem aspect of everything, like knowing that they're not as physically fit as others, and that fear of being cast out, whether it be by brass or by fellow brothers and sisters, to where it plays that mental thing, thinking that they're not going to be able to perform, even though they can perform. Them looking at themselves or others, talking in the shadows about an individual's physical fitness and things like that. Do you think that plays a role on the mental health side of it when individuals? Because some individuals, it's just genetics. Some individuals could go out there and run every day, yet they're still going to pack on 20 pounds, especially when we start getting up in age. Metabolism and everything else doesn't break down the same. So how much does that play into, Jason, how do you think that the mental health is affected by that?
Well, I would say, 2 things. First of all, I don't think that there's necessarily a built-in excuse because of your age that you can just gain 20 pounds. In actuality, you don't start seeing a drop in your metabolic rate until you turn 60 in the average person, both male and female. That's kind of a myth in the fitness industry that when we hit 40, if we're a male, our testosterone starts to drop. That's all BS. Okay, that's
just trying to sell some pills.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't really buy that. The bottom line is what you're putting in your mouth is probably about 80% of that issue that you're talking about. The other 20% is your physical fitness level, whether you're actually training, at least 4 to 5 times a week vigorously as recommended. But on the mental health side, I can kind of answer that with just a quick experience that I had back in the late 90s, I was part of a group where, you know, I have to understand, I was trying to push physical fitness on my agency, which was the seventh largest at the time I was there in the country. So big agency, a lot of people trying to push physical fitness. Something that we thought would work was we would create an annual fitness test that was voluntary. And if you passed it, you get a pin that you wear on your uniform that said fit for duty. Okay, that's it. The union shut that down exactly for the reason that you're talking about, because they thought that people would go into oral boards and promotionals and you know, walking around the substation with that fit for duty pin on there would separate the fit group from the group that allegedly was not fit, and thus they would be outcast. That's in 1998 is when that took place. And, you know, again, myself and a lot of people, I'm sure everybody in this group fought for that our entire careers. But the bottom line is there's so much push against it. And I still believe it is today because people don't understand training. They don't know how to work out. And more importantly, they don't know what to eat. That's the key. I mean, anytime there's an issue at a substation, like say there's a critical incident, what does the community do? They bring pizza and baked goods and crap and donuts, and we eat them. Okay? That is the problem. Too many calories, too much bad stuff going into our bodies, and we're just simply, we're human, right? And I mean, you said it yourself, Michael. It's okay to gain 20 pounds because, you know, you're 40 now. Well, I say that's not true. And until we get past that issue, we're going to have a problem with the physical fitness in our profession.
Well, I can tell you this: I'm not going to stop eating pizza. I don't care. You know.
Moderation, right? Moderation.
Yeah, a lot of I mean, it's I almost feel like it's un-American not to eat pizza. So there you go. You got anything on that, David?
No, I think everybody covered it pretty well. I mean, I can say a few additional things on, you know, the age thing. You know, you're definitely right, and especially depending on what you do to train, right? I can say this: I was a CrossFit instructor in 2008, right? And I was one of the first to go through some of these CrossFit certifications. I thought this was the answer to the problem, right? Get us all in shape, and I can tell you right now, it wore on my bones more than jiu-jitsu does today. And I had a lot of injuries because I was trying to be so competitive in CrossFit. And I can tell you right now, I can't perform the way I did when I was in my 20s. And now that I'm 43 years old, it is rough for me to do some of the things I did in my 30s. So I do see like some type of scale, but then becomes a dilemma, right? Do we set the bar at, again, that 99% standard to where it's so easy that everybody passes, and then it defeats the purpose, right? So there's going to be that dichotomy. And where do we draw the line? And do we add a minute, you know, here? Because I know on the SWAT team for us, we had, you know, if you were in your 20s, you had to run 1.5 miles in 12 minutes, but you got the extra minute if you were over 30, and then you got 2 minutes extra if you're over 40. So, I mean, it made a little bit of sense to do it that way, but make it still tough enough to where you had to actually train for it. So just some perspectives to look at and what I've experienced. And I agree 100% that the mental health portion is extremely important. You know, we see so many officers suffering from mental health. We see a lot of mental health related retirements. We see a lot of mental health related suicides. That is a huge issue. We definitely want to solve that issue. And again, you know, being physically fit and being active does help a lot of that. And it just helps in stress in general, right? I mean, when, you know, the only way you can actually induce stress in a training environment is either A, really induce stress by having, you know, a major confrontation, or, you know, on a gun range, when you're doing some type of a shooting scenario, you want to make them do burpees or push-ups or something to get their heart rate elevated to simulate that stress, right? So it's the same concept. The more in shape you are, the better shape you are, the more you handle, the better you handle that stress just to start with.
100%. And then, Chad, can you hear us right now?
I think Chad's stuck there.
He's frozen.
Buffering. And then, Jason, under your so in military, speaking on this subject of age, so does military place restrictions? I'm not going to say place restrictions, but do they lighten requirements based on age?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, that's what I was saying. You have probably 100 years of data from 4 branches of the military that can indicate performance levels from the age groups of 18 to 29, 30 to 39, and so on up. Now, I don't think it's going to be very common to have somebody that's 60 plus years old in the military. I'm sure there are a few, but it's probably fairly uncommon. But yeah, those are the kinds of standards that I would certainly recommend. But like I said, it comes down to what is the end goal here? What are we trying to do? In my mind, it's about being healthier, because I think a healthier officer is a better officer overall. For a multitude of reasons that, you know, we've kind of talked to right now. When you talk about defensive tactics, I mean, just the performance of those tactics to standard takes a certain level of physical fitness. But to do them like Chris was talking about, you're in a knockdown, drag out fight, it's absolutely crucial. I mean, anybody who's been on the mat and rolled for 60 seconds should be able to understand that. But then again, that's just the trick, as I'm sure Ray would attest, is getting your average cop to actually do that and understand that. But yeah, to answer your question, age is certainly a factor. We all slow down as we get older. My only point is there are things you can do to train smart and watch your nutrition, which means eating smart, and you can negate a lot of those issues we're talking about, like weight gain and loss of performance in certain physical areas.
And then now, Ray and David, during the trainings, do you ever see like individuals, I'm not going to say I am going to say it. Do you see individuals getting discouraged in a sense to where it's a lot, which is kind of like a good thing to kind of, you know, push in their mind, like, well, you see how important this is. But I mean, do you see individuals that, you know, kind of get discouraged or, you know, feel like they can't do that? And if so, you know, how do you guys motivate them or push them rather to go ahead and complete and to kind of, you know, give just a little bit more?
Well, you know, we go into training and our philosophy has been, you know, with positivity. And I think if you go in there and you encourage the person who's wanting to be there, obviously they're in the room with you, especially in our trainings, because like I said, their department paid for them to be there, or sometimes it's the individuals even pay for themselves to be there, unfortunately. But you know, we see that the physical aspect, you know, when they're in class, some of them have, you know, towards the end of the day, everyone gets tired. But some of the ones that are not physically fit are even a lot more tired and a lot more sore, you know, because some of them are going from the couch to going in and doing defensive tactics. And you know what I've had an officer, especially he works in an agency not too far from where I am at now, but he came to one of our classes. And then after that, he joined an MMA gym. And he started training, and he lost some weight, and he's doing Muay Thai now. He's more physically fit probably than he's ever been. And you know, I think it started from that exposure. So if he came into the room and I said, man, you need to get up off the ground, you need to suck it up, why don't you lose some weight? And I treated him that way, then he probably would never want to come back. He probably wouldn't want to improve himself. We're our worst critics when it comes to looking in the mirror at ourselves and saying, you know, hey, I don't look as good as I should. You know, but the fact comes back to we want to improve them. So if we go in there with that attitude and say, listen, we're here to help you. We want to improve you and we want to make you better for you and your agency. And I think if we do that across the board, we can create a culture that's going to be better, you know.
And then on Jason's point, you know, what do you think about, because again, if we're trying to push, you know, the physical requirements, you know, and trying to, you know, find the resolve to where we can get it in there, you know, how much of, you know, having a nutritionist or a dietitian or somebody available for officers to speak to, how much, I mean, how do you think that could play into to where, I mean, I'm not saying that we'd have to have one on there like, you know, psych, but realistically, I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt to have a dietitian, whether they were contracted out or, you know, somebody that's actually on staff. Because I'm pretty sure, David, I know you were, you know, sergeant for like personnel and training. So how much of like the personnel and training actually plays into that role as far as, you know, being for the officers and what they could do, such as like what Jason was saying, you know, pushing nutrition and things like that?
I mean, and again, the problem with nutrition and pushing that down, right, is there's so many opinions on that as well, right? You can make or break the group by hiring the wrong nutritionist to come in and push the agenda that they follow, right? And that's what I've seen. Like I said, I hate to go back to the CrossFit era, but I've been in seminars with multiple different nutritionists, right? And go from a caveman diet to paleo diet and different diets. And some of this stuff, is really popular for a couple years, and then it dies off, and then there's a new trend that comes into play. So I don't, obviously, from my perspective, at least training them the general benefits of nutrition is better than nothing, and trying to make sure that you're pushing something, because the reality is, like Jason said earlier, a lot of people don't understand what they should and shouldn't eat. I've had people ask me, well, am I doing this right? But they're eating yogurt like 7 times a day, right? And they think that they're getting nutrition from their yogurt and eating a lot of different things that I'm like, okay, well, my opinion is absolutely not. That's terrible. But am I 100% right? I mean, I'm not a doctor. I don't know exactly, and I can't recommend what exactly you should eat, but I have some general ideas of what, would be good for you. And we can bring some nutritionists in. But yeah, I agree that I think we do have to push some of that as well, and bring in a nutritionist and pick the right one, right? And make sure that, it is general and it is generally beneficial to the entire group.
Well, remember, one of the things I think we have to get across when we talk about nutritionists is it has to be a lifestyle, not a diet. So the last place I'd ever send a police officer to is YouTube, where you've got just a ridiculous amount of fitness industry information and diet information. You name some of them: paleo, Mediterranean diet, carnivore diet, keto diet. I'm telling you right now, nobody should be on any diet. You know why? Because it's only going to last so long. If it's not sustainable, we're talking about a career as a police officer, 25 to 30 years for all of us. You need to be on a nutrition plan that you can live with. Ray wants pizza. Well, you have it once a week. The other 6 days, you eat clean. So we have to teach people what's clean. But Michael, I would say this. We all hear, if you follow the NBA, that you probably always hear that LeBron James spends $1 million on his body every year to be who he is. Okay. And most professional athletes, they train and they have professional nutritionists. They have trainers to ensure they're in peak condition. Here's my question to all of you. Why is it that in law enforcement that we are not treated more like professional athletes? Think about the job that we do. Why is it that we do not have a healthy meal prepared for every officer at every substation for their lunch, instead of them going to some bar at 2 a.m. eating chicken wings and fried food? Why do we not have that? You're talking about a nutritionist or a dietitian or an exercise physiologist or, somebody at the substation level that I feel like an officer should be able to make an appointment with on duty to get the kind of advice they need, the coaching that they need on how to work out. Those are the things that professional athletes have access to. And yet the worst thing that's going to happen to them is they lose a football or basketball game. What's the worst thing that happens to us?
Yeah. That's a great point as well, too, because even with, kind of going back what I was saying earlier in regard to the officers that are, pulling the 15 hours a double shift, to where, feeling that lethargic, being able to talk to somebody like, look, how can I get more energy? How can I, make myself feel more alert? I mean, because there are different nutritional diets where individuals can feel more alert, have more energy and things like that, rather than just like dragging along. And I mean, you don't have to convince me. I believe it's vital every step of the way. It's even with, physical fitness, it does you no good if, you're going to go run a mile, but then you're going to slam down, a half a dozen of donuts, with cream filling, it's just, unless it's worked out for the calorie intake. But then again, the profession of whatever field you're in, you take a patrol officer that's just sitting and driving all day. It's no different than somebody just sitting on a couch flipping through the channels, just, sucking food back. So, that diet's going to, like David pointed out, that diet's going to be completely different than the next individual. It's not a one size fits all, type, I'm not going to say diagnosis, but, as far as the actual schedule and regimen for that.
Yeah, and you would think that the some of the healthcare costs that cities and counties are putting forth could be spent towards something like that, some type of nutritional plans. And some of the HR departments now are moving that health, mental health awareness programs as they're out there. They advise you, that there's hotlines that you can call for mental health, and then they have nutrition plans sometimes that they'll have at the health fair. But Jason's totally right. I think the money, I think especially a nutritionist and a publicist as well. I really say the agencies should really publicize themselves and put out there what they're doing good on a regular basis. Well, a nutritionist is the same thing. I think if an agency looks at the cost of it and says, well, okay, can we lower our health care cost over 5 years to where it's pretty much pays for the nutritionist itself, then why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we take that on? I just don't know if anyone's ever looked at that and put pen to paper and actually examined it and said, is this efficient, and is it going to be something that's going to work across the board, and are we going to be able to afford it as well? So right now, unfortunately, so many agencies are spending money on bonuses for officers. They're just trying to get officers hired, and a lot of that money that they're spending on those bonuses is coming from training budgets, is coming from other parts of the department there, and some of the smaller agencies just cannot compete.
100%. And then now, Chris, I know, and especially it's you experiencing the 3-4 critical incidents during your career. How much, and I know that the one incident to where, your partner couldn't jump the 4-foot wall, how much does that play in like you looking back on, with physical fitness, and how much it affects not necessarily even just the partners, but I mean, everybody involved. I mean, you're putting people's lives at risk because you can't have my back or this, the other.
Well, I mean, I'll start off the harsh way that, luckily the guy wasn't my partner. He was just another officer that I worked with. There's absolutely no excuse for that whatsoever. And I told him straight up, I said, after we got done, I said, man, you know what? I said, do me a favor, if you can't, and that's exactly how I said, if you can't get your fat ass over that wall, don't back me up. Straight up. And I felt bad about saying that, but I was angry. I got stuck out on basically almost like a sniper hat, if you will, on a roof by myself because this guy couldn't get out there to back me up. And I think everything that we're talking about here is 100% spot on. And I don't think that there's any difference between mental health and physical health. And you've heard me say this before, Michael, where it's one of those things where if you want to be okay, you will. If you're making excuses why and you guys keep looking at me, I know eat the pizzas and the yogurt, and now I'm all hungry thanks to you guys, but whatever. If that's where you want to be, then that's where you're going to be, and if you want to continue to be that guy or that gal, then you really don't have any excuses when things aren't going the way you think they should, physically or mentally. And again, I'm going to say it again, just to drive the point home. If you want to be okay, you will. If you want to be fit, you will. If you don't, then you're going to stay in the kind of the drowning pool that you're in, if you will. So
the oath of office, why you took it in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's a great question as well too, John. But I believe, because he's asking about if department should designate an officer to learn nutrition to become a department nutritionalist instead of paying an additional person to do the same thing. I mean, that would be a pretty huge expense because they'd be paying said officer to uphold the duties of what they're already doing. And then nutritionists go through some pretty extensive schooling. I mean, there's a lot to it, as Jason's pointed out. But that's just me. But it's different on like nutrition because of it relating different to individuals, their habits, their lifestyle, and things like that, opposed to when you guys are training someone for like defensive tactics, you can kind of form fit towards the individual, as far as, what's going to work for them. I mean, what do you guys think about what he's asking here?
Yeah. Well, I think if an agency, if that's the route they go and they decide that they're going to hire an officer on to do that, then they need to designate that officer that's their, one of their primary duties. And because notoriously departments try to do as much as they can with as less as possible. And I get that. And I understand that, the financial aspect comes into it as well. But if you hire someone who's already been trained in nutrition and has went to the schools on it and knows more about it, then they're probably going to be more passionate about it, hopefully as well, because they're not being pulled in several different directions. And their job, and they're getting paid from the city for that contract, is to provide that nutritional services and maybe even the meals themselves as well. And I don't think that's a bad option, depending on how much obviously that costs. But there may be officers that can contribute to the program where they would spend, $15 now, unfortunately at Whataburger. Now they could spend, $7 and have a nutritional meal that's already made for them at their police department by the nutritionist. So that might be a solution there as well to the problem. But we got to get officers to go in there and eat that food. And you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And that goes back again, like David said, to the culture as well.
It reminds me of something Chris said earlier when you were talking about officers who all they can think about is leaving the street after a couple of years and getting to another assignment. Wouldn't that be just the ultimate job? You get to be the department nutritionist at your substation to get off the street. No, to answer John's question, I would absolutely say that is a position that takes years and years of schooling, expertise, and experience. And policing is a very serious job. That's what you were trained to do. It's a complex enough job without having to suddenly become, an expert in nutrition. I don't think we're going to get the same result. I'm talking about somebody that is embedded in a substation as a civilian whose sole purpose is to counsel police officers on their diets, to teach them what to shop for, how to cook it, what to bring in your cooler so that when you miss lunch, you're not going on a drive-through or getting an energy drink or whatever. You've got fresh, clean food in a cooler. But see, that's easier said than done, right? Because a lot of officers don't know what to put in that cooler. So you need somebody there to teach them. I think that this goes with the civilian population too. I think they're just not educated on fitness, nutrition, and how to train properly. And cops are certainly no different. I know we think we can kick everybody's ass, but that's not true. And unfortunately, without that education, we're going to be stuck in this same rut. Dr. John Scheinberg, who's a cardiologist out of Austin, he recently completed a study, 5,000 peace officers in the state of Texas, 80% obese. If that's not alarming to everybody listening to this about this profession that we hold so in such high regard, I don't know what would be. But we have a problem and we have to fix it.
And I believe that someone that's kind of trained in that field should be the one that comes in there, kind of like, all of you being trained, having that experience. And Chris, you and I have had this conversation 100 times over about how, like, nowadays it's, our superiors, the brass, they're being promoted based on test taking abilities rather than experience, rather than know-how. It benefits agencies to have Ray, David, Jason, Christopher coming to their agencies and train these officers, because you guys have been vetted enough to where you've experienced that real life action. You've experienced the know-hows, the ins, the outs, the experience of things that can happen, the unorthodox, that, outside of the controlled environment that, officers receive through the academy. It's a controlled environment to where you guys have been exposed to that uncontrolled environment to where you're able to provide that to them. And yeah, you can provide, the instruction to a trainer, but it's still not going to give them that knowledge of actually witnessing from, the four of you of, based on your experience. And I've always been a firm believer on having the contractors and people that, have actually been there, done that, come in there, provide that knowledge, pay that direction, opposed to someone that read a book. You can learn a lot from reading a book, but without having the hands-on and the direction on being able to watch, somebody's, position, their footing and everything else, and knowing how to go in and act on that, that's not something that you're going to pick up just reading a fucking book. Excuse my language, but, it's just not going to happen like that. Same thing with nutrition. Somebody's, like Jason just pointed out, that's years and years of just studying different body types and things like that, and knowing how to, best suit it based on lifestyle and everything else, plays so many different factors into that.
Yeah, and I agree.
You have to have that education, Michael, and then it would be the same thing for having coaching and trainers at the substation level. Like David was talking about CrossFit injuries. Well, our job obviously creates a lot of injuries. I mean, I don't know anybody. Ray mentioned low back pain a little while ago. Everybody's got something wrong with them. So why do you need an exercise physiologist there? To be able to teach and coach an officer how to train around those injuries, because it's not an excuse that because you're injured that you can become obese and therefore unhealthy and unable to do your job. You still have to be able to perform it. So you have to find a way around those injuries. And there are, I mean, everybody here, I'm sure, trains and works out. There are a lot of ways to train around those injuries. We're not going to just suddenly leave the gym and take a month off because of that.
Yeah, it's like I'm 40, about to turn 48, and I train still in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so I go there and I roll with younger guys like David, that are in the gym, and some of them are, like I said, 20 and earlier 20s that I'm rolling around with, and it takes a toll. But what I figured out is how not to be injured. I see so many people that go in there and they're doing our sport, and they end up with knee injuries, they end up with shoulder injuries, and I decided, hey, this is a marathon. And so I want to be able to make it for the long run. And so you're right, Jason, being able to have that knowledge. I try to stay in my lane. And so being able to have that knowledge about nutrition, I can't sit here on this broadcast and say, oh yeah, well, I know about nutrition, because no, I don't. I agree. As a cop, it's like I say, don't go and speak to a cop about financial, your retirement. Speak to somebody who knows about finances. Speak to somebody who's specialized in this. And so it's the same thing with nutrition. We need to have people that are specialized in that area to come in and work in those departments and work with them. Doesn't mean they have to stay there. It may be a contract that's 5 years. And within that 5-year period, someone else takes it over within the agency, and then they start to run it on their own. So that, at least they realize, hey, they're not going to be here forever. That they're that 5-year period, they're going to be gone anyway, and we're going to be on our own.
And then how much of when you go in, have you ever had like the officers, they kind of pull you to the side, or, Chris, I know guys come up to you like after, the training, like the one-on-ones, but, how many want further training? I mean, because it's, and David pointed it out earlier to where, you have these tests every 2 years, and going back to the complacency aspect, if you're not training yourself for something, and I'm not going to say you forget how, but you could forget how, but, how much of the retraining do they, come back for, rather than it being, oh, hey, it's been a year, I need this retraining? I mean, how much?
Well, I think my opinion on that is, if you got guys that are motivated that want to train, I had a kid today that came in for his, he just signed up on all his qual stuff. And I said, hey, I'll see you at the next range date. He goes, hopefully not too soon. What does that tell me right there? The guy, he's not interested in shooting, that kills me. But side note, I think what Jason was sitting on earlier, I think I want to kind of revisit that a little bit about, if you got somebody, it's going to take a special person. It's going to be very hard to find somebody. But I look at it as in like the chaplaincy. How many chaplains have we got running around? My old agency, they had 2 or 3 at any given time that were accessible to us whenever we wanted. I just call them up and say, hey, meet me over here, wherever. I think if we could try, I know it's going to be very, very difficult to do. If we can implement that somehow, we've got somebody that can just say, hey, you know what? Meet me over here at, wherever. We can just talk about your fitness or what have you, or your nutrition or whatever. I think that'd be great just to have some kind of a resource for the officers to go to. Again, it's going to be, because I know, and I think David touched on this a little bit too, talking about one particular company that came in and schooled us back when I think I had 12 or 13 years on back then. And I went to them, and they were like freaking witch doctors, man. Just totally butchered me. And it turned me off that whole thing. And they, as it turned out, they were just out for the money. They weren't out for our well-being and stuff. So I think if you got somebody that's more dedicated to the cause, that's there to be there for an entire agency, that might be a way to go. I don't know.
100%. It goes back to what, with Ray saying about, he doesn't and never will offer like the online training. Because again, it goes back to, that's when because you see them out there. There are different organizations out there that do the online just to kind of, and that's where it becomes that money agency. They really don't care about the safety, well-being, the training of, fellow officers or any other profession for that matter. To where, hey, look, if you really want this, you're going to see the individuals that come in there and do that. They give it to all when they're on the mat and things like that as well, too.
Well, what those agencies are doing is crossing their fingers and hoping that they don't have to go to court on a use of force. They're not the next Derek Chauvin case. That's what they're hoping they're not. And each one of them, like I said, are just crossing the fingers. And it's going to happen eventually. So why wouldn't you be prepared? It's no different, if an officer in Chris's situation, for instance, had a partner that was not able to climb a wall. And what if that officer was severely hurt or killed? Would that department go to the widow of that officer and say, hey, you know what, our other officer was not able to climb a wall, and that's why your husband or your wife is not coming home tonight? No, none of them would do that. But in actuality, those people exist. They're out there right now that are working the streets that can't do that. They can't climb over a wall. They can barely get up off the ground. They exist. We know this. So the goal is like we said, not to say, hey, we don't want you in law enforcement. The goal is to say, how can we help you to better yourself? How can we get you in the physical shape? And you can do it. It's a slippery slope sometimes, when you become obese. And like I said, I've been overweight and I could be even thinner now. But what I'm saying is over time, once you become so obese, you feel like you're depressed. And that goes back to the mental aspect of it as well. And you ride around with the vest on, and then you have to move it around in the car because your gut's sticking out and it's pushing down, and it becomes uncomfortable. And so when you're in those type situations, you start becoming, like I said, depressed, and you start the mental health, and then along with that, less sleep. And then more health problems and more using of the city or their employment insurance that you have because you're having knee issues, you're having cardiovascular issues. I don't know what study if you look at, but they say that, and it's gotten better over time, I do believe, but the average life expectancy is somewhere around 64, depending on what you look at after retirement. And like Jason said, 80% out of the 5,000 that he examined were obese. That's a numbers that should cause us all to have severe concern.
Yeah, Dr. Scheinberg, I would highly recommend that you guys look into his work. And he's a board certified cardiologist from Austin, Texas. He's one of the subjects in a film that I'm working on the topics we're talking about right now. And one of the things that when he travels the country and the message he puts out is a number of studies that indicate that the average civilian lives to be 79 years, but the average cop lives to be 57 years, which is a 22-year disparity. And that is far and away the largest disparity of any occupation in the United States. So it is a very serious issue. And I don't know what the solutions are necessarily because there's such broad strokes and there's such, resistance for whatever reason. I know that you can kind of use that vaccine issue that we've dealt with here in this country the last couple of years. Nobody wants to be told to do anything. I think that's pretty clear. And I think that if you start to tell police officers, well, this is what you need to eat and you are going to go work out, well, we already know what's going to happen. We know the resistance, which is why I always say, and David couldn't have hit it better on the head. We have to reimagine the culture. We cannot think that way anymore. We have to think more of our profession.
Again, Chris, I keep going back to that oath of office. Realistically, so many officers forget, why we enlisted, why we did anything that we did, made that decision to do that, and some of them have, I'm not going to say ill intentions, but it's just a job just to go try out, having those individuals around, they're not only jeopardizing, the fellow brothers and sisters that they serve with, but, the public as well in the civilian sector. So it's something that needs to take pride in, whether it's nutrition or physical fitness.
Yeah. I got to throw it out there too, because I completely recognize the fact that, hey, I'm on my couch over here in San Diego, right by the beach. I'm retired. I'm not facing the horrors every day like these guys are now. So I completely acknowledge that. And the stuff that I was going through during the last couple of years of my career, I guarantee that 100 guys have been through the exact same thing, but nobody could put themselves in a place where I was then, personally. So I don't want to take that away from these guys that think, oh, well, you can do whatever you want to because, Chris, that's what Chris Hoyer says you need to be doing. Well, that's bullshit. We all know that. Again, I think we need to figure out a way internally to motivate ourselves to want to get back to where we were, have that drive, have that fire. And Ray, on your point, you're talking about, you're driving around and you're getting a little chunky and you're like, oh man, but then I know I've been through it 100 times where I'm like, man, I'm gonna start doing this and it doesn't work, and then I try this and that doesn't work. So how do you find the one that works for you? I don't know. I mean, I went on. I hate to use the word diet now that Jason's kind of throwing out there, but I went on the fasting diet for a while, and it actually worked really well for me. It worked great, and now I'm kind of promoting that a little bit to where, and of course you're gonna do it how you're gonna do it, but what I did worked really good, and I thought, hey, shit, this is finally something that's working for me. So,
Well, we know there is no magic bullet, right? And I mean, that's the thing. I think people kind of, what you were just talking about, Chris, they'll do these diets, and because they'll see some before and after pictures somewhere, and they'll have gotten advice from a buddy or whatever, and then they'll think that it's going to work for them. And they attach a time frame to that. They're like, well, I'm going to do this for a week or 2 weeks or 30 days. And they're looking in the mirror and they're not seeing a change. And so they just give up on it. And I think everyone has to understand that that's why you have to think lifestyle. It's not going to be a change that you're going to make on a temporary basis. It has to be a permanent change. You have to think exactly like a professional athlete will. You have to think, I need to perform at a peak physical level every single shift, or I might not come home. I mean, that's the reality, right? So those are the kinds of things that we like to talk about. They sound really neat, but like you said, it has to come from within. And how do we motivate people to the level to think that, yes, this is important? I mean, I try to attack it from the health side of things, but you can attack it from a lot of other areas. Ray and I talk all the time about defensive tactics and the proficiency level and how it stinks in this country in practically every law enforcement agency. That also could keep you from going home. David just touched on that a little while ago, talking about the fact that without those defensive tactics, as a SWAT officer, you're not going to be able to control people. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a job where you put your hands on people. It would make sense if you were good at it, right?
You would think.
Say so, yeah.
Yeah, I agree exactly with what you're saying. Dealing with that aspect of it. I really wish that more, departments, it would get easier for agencies. It's like when they go to the academy. In the academy, they get defensive tactics training. Then when they get there to their agency, they don't get any. And that plays, just like they expect there to be, most of them expect there to be some type of physical standard too when they get to their agency. And then they get there and they go, oh, well, there's no physical standard. And I want to employ the officers that may be listening to this podcast either now or later on, that they also go back to their agency and they look at it as, how can I help those people? So maybe go back there and start, hey, if it's around December, that January, people like to start diets around that time, right? So listen, we say, hey, everybody throws in $50 or $100, and we say, you're not going to go to, everybody agrees that they're not going to go to any place that has a window where you can pick up fast food, that we're not going to go to a restaurant that has a window. And so that alone, I did that in my own agency, and numerous officers or a few officers had lost weight by not just for a month, not going to any place that had a window where you could pick it up from a drive-through. And so it calls them to bring their dinner, their lunch, and it calls them to sit down. When you're working nights, there's not much out there to choose from, unfortunately. I wish that there was, and that's why I think that nutritionists could come into place, especially for the night shift officers that are out there in Whataburger and Jack in the Box and IHOP and things like that. That are the only thing that are open at 3:00 in the morning, to grab something. And that's where I started bringing my own lunch. But then again, those officers that are out there that don't know what to bring. And so they go in there in the break room, and what's on the table? Pizza, donuts, and all kind of fattening. In the vending machine there has nothing but chips and candy bars and things like that, and that's what they're eating. And so how do we expect them to get in shape when they're putting that type of fuel in their body? They're not going to.
Hey, gents, I got to go eat some pizza and yogurt, so I'm gonna head out. Thanks for the chat. You guys do a great job, and thanks for trying to reshape law enforcement and think about the future.
Always a pleasure having you. I'd like to, if you have time sometime, I'd kind of like to have you and do a one-on-one with you to kind of be able to spend more time and talk about the things you do and everything as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Sir.
Thank you, Dave.
Here we go.
Well, I guess in closing, I guess we're getting probably close to that 2-hour mark, and I doubt anyone would want to listen to us past the 2-hour mark. It's I wanted to touch on Jason. Like I said, he's got a film that's coming up that he's going to be putting out eventually, and I hope I'm not stepping out of bounds by saying that, Jason. And if I am, but he does, and I would encourage people to. I mean, not only is my beautiful face in it, but I would encourage people to watch it because you can learn something from that. And that's why I really wish that this maybe we had more people that were signed on to these type of things where we could see them and ask more questions and try to answer those questions for them. And because I'd like to have some dialogue in that area and and I can learn something from them as well and how they feel about the subject, and I think that's important for us to be open-minded when we're looking at these things. And the goal is not to get rid of these officers. It's really not. And I think there's so many officers out there that they feel that way. They feel like, they're trying to get rid of me. That's the reason why they're implementing this, the standard. And I know that in my own agency, that's what a lot of officers thought, that they were wanting to get rid of them. And that's not really the case. It shouldn't be. It should be, hey, there's plenty of time to conform. Here's the nutrition plans. We're going to do everything we can to help you, and that way you get to enjoy that retirement. And I'm retired as well, and I actually work now more than I did when I was working as an officer. But still, at the same time, it'd be nice to be able to enjoy 30, 40 years and get as much of the city money as I possibly could. That's my goal.
Yes, sir.
I want him to call up. Is he dead yet? No. Hanging out? Yeah. He's still collecting money. Yeah.
Jason, if you don't mind, I'm going to share Christopher's information with you and vice versa as well, too. Because Christopher, he has a book, When That Day Comes, Training for the Fight, and, had several critical incidents, one in which, his partner, David Glasser, lost his life and everything, too. And I know you in for the documentaries, whether it be a short one and things like that. And I think that, one story would be good for the other as well, too. So you guys might want to have a discussion about stuff like that as well, too. But it was a pleasure. And Ray, to touch on what you were saying in regard to that is I've actually purchased because I have other businesses and stuff that too, but I'm going to start doing a dial-in to where if individuals don't actually have this visual chat to where they can actually call in on the phone, ask questions and things like that, to where because my audio, because I have the audio podcast as well, but it comes after when I actually upload off of the audio, and then I post it as the audio podcast. But I'm going to start doing it as a simultaneous to where individuals can call in, they can actually chat with us, in live, because that's one of the main reasons why I do this is to kind of get the input, from others as well too, and have the questions answered, accordingly.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Like I said, if officers if they had a program like that, because some of them are out there, even if it were live, like for instance, like it is here, where they may be out there in that smaller town, they hadn't had a call in a while, and it's cold out and it's slow, and they want to be able to call in and put their 2 cents into it. I think that'd be fantastic, and I think it'd give them a voice on how they feel, because they don't always have a voice. Sometimes it's the politician, or it's the chief of the agency, or the sheriff, or the county commissioner. And I really think those frontline officers need a voice, and they need somewhere that they can talk about the problems that they're seeing.
100%. And I appreciate you guys' time so much. I want you guys to stay safe, stay blessed, and all things. Jason, I'd like to have a one-on-one with you as well too, if you find time and things. And Christopher, always a pleasure. You guys had your next book reading up.
Yeah.
Ray, thank you so much for encouraging this, Ray. It's awesome what you do, and I'll keep pushing and things like that. And I have a couple of hubs down here in Florida that I want to kind of start scheduling your different training courses for them as well, too. So I'll be speaking to you real soon.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And if anybody wants to reach out to us, they can go to blueshieldtactical.com and they can see the courses that we have coming up. And I'm looking forward to seeing Jason's film come out. Like I said, of course I'm in it, but at the same time, I want to be able to see the other input by the other trainers and the cardiologists that he was speaking about, because I'm always interested in that information. And any way that we can improve ourselves and improve our fellow officers, I don't care their size or anything else, the better that we can make them is what they're here to do. So.
Well, I'll tell you what, when the movie does come out, I think if you guys see it, you'll be astonished, because a lot of the dialogue we've had here tonight is literally and quite, exactly the issues that we've been talking about are covered in this film. It's called Wrist Lock, the martial arts influence on police use of force. And it goes through all the different martial arts and how defensive tactics is derived from martial arts, and then goes into the use of force issues and kind of breaks it down into the three areas we were talking about, to say that in every use of force encounter, police officers need to have defensive tactics proficiency, physical fitness, and mental health for every decision that they make and every encounter that they're in physically. And the fact that, at least in my opinion and many others, agencies are not doing what they need to do to keep officers at the level they need to be in those situations. And so, yeah, as Ray alluded to, he's one of the many people in the film that discuss those issues. And, some of the solutions, many of which we've talked about here tonight.
Perfect. I look forward to that. I'm gonna make a post on that as well too. And you guys stay safe, stay blessed in all things. Thank you so much for your time.
And also, Chris is my new best friend because he lives in the in what did you say, San Diego by the beach? Yeah, that's my new best friend.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I was going to ask you because Natalie, my girlfriend's son, lives out in Johnson County, out in Cleburne.
Oh yeah.
So I was going to ask you next time we're actually out there, if I could jump into one of your classes here. Of course, I'll pay for it, whatever else.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
We'll talk about that at the appropriate time.
But not an issue.
Yeah. But then, Jason, I think we hooked up on LinkedIn today, if I'm not mistaken.
You did, yes.
I'll reach out to you the next couple of days. I got so much shit going on. It's unbelievable. But I'd love to kind of bend your ear a little bit more about my story and kind of where we can go with that if you're interested. So
awesome. Sounds good.
Cool. Michael,
It's a beautiful thing what we're doing.
love you, man. Good to see you again, everybody.
Also, I was going to say to the officers that are out there, if you ever have any questions or find yourself in a situation where you're needing someone in your corner, when it comes to use of force or something like that with your agency, I'm here to support you. I'm here to help you. Even though, we do work for your agencies as well, we're also here to support you because I realize, when you're alone and you're by yourself and you feel like you're in that situation and everyone's against you, it can be tough. So we're always here to be able to answer any questions that you have and help you even and not charge you a thing.
100%. That's awesome. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Stay safe. Stay blessed, everyone. Love you, brother.
All right. See you guys.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.